Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM. And check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
From 52, Adam Vinatieri lining it up. Rigoberto Sanchez looking for the hole from Luke Rhodes. Here it is. Snap, ball down, kick is up. It's on its way, past the distance, and it is... It's good! It's good! Adam Vinatieri knocks it down, and the Colts have the lead! The Colts have the lead! From 52, the greatest of all time knocks it through, and the Colts lead it 15-13 with 22 seconds left. Holy my!
The Cardiac Colts strike again. You never apologize for winning the NFL, and there is no apologizing at West 56th Street on this Monday. I'm Kevin Bowen. Back, another edition of Kevin's Corner. Joey Molinaro decked out in his black and yellow for his boys tonight on Monday Night Football. Wow, what a matchup. Steelers and Dolphins. Nothing says get on your couch and get ready for football like that.
Hey, it's the Super Bowl to the Molinaros, so let's do it.
That is fair. I respect that. Obviously, Colts and Steelers a week from Sunday, and when the Colts travel to Heinz Field, they will be heading there winners of 3 straight. Joey, not pretty. Insert your cliche of there's never such thing as a ugly win or whatever. I'd rather win ugly than have a pretty loss. Whatever. Survive in advance, 7 straight games now, 1-score games for the Colts this season, and they continue to find a way, this one in a much different way than the first 6 games, but they find a way to get it done.
Yeah, another one is, that's a sign of a good team is when they play poorly and they pull out a win, right? That's another one you hear a lot.
Yeah.
And they did that yesterday, and I think I liked what you said off the top. Cardiac Colts, I think it might be time to start printing some shirts here soon.
Something like that. Only team in the NFL with 7 straight 1-score games to start the year, and yes, there is this big picture debate certainly about the Colts and playing to their competition, which I think has such a negative connotation that comes with it. Like, oh yeah, this team plays to their competition. That can be good and bad. When you play to your competition, that means you won an Arrowhead, and then you came back the next week and beat Houston. There's not just all bad with that phrase being thrown out there. So, yeah, it is something that we've seen that so far through the first 7 games that you would like to see, I think, the Colts play to a standard that's their standard week in and week out and not necessarily, I get it, there's parity in the NFL, but there's not this much parity. The Colts have been the outlier of all 32 teams in the league in terms of playing to their competition. And certainly when you're looking at playoff teams, they're by far the only team in the AFC South playoff picture that has not won a game by 2 scores.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird stat. You look at the AFC South, the Colts lead the division by a game, and obviously were aided big time by the J.J. Watt injury last night. But I think they have the smallest point differential of any team in the division, which is kind of weird.
Right.
Now, it's a very even division. Every team is at least 500 or better, but the Colts just haven't blown out teams. They haven't run away from teams. I thought Sunday had the opportunity to be that, and Denver's defense lived up to it. But I just thought with the Colts healthy, we would have seen a better performance. 21 of 22 starters available, for you. That's a rarity in today's NFL, especially in late October. So yeah, good and bad from it, but the ultimate thing is you're 5-2, and you sit right now as the number 2 seed in the AFC, which is, again, unbelievable.
Large part of that is because of you have here down on the rundown the play. And who knows, by the end of the season, it seemed to me like a play that you look back on in an America's Game type of documentary, right? This is something that changed the tide of, okay, this is what the season's going to be. And that was the play that Jacoby Brissett made and that 2-minute drive.
Cue the NFL Films voice. Cue the... What if I told you?
Yeah.
Von Miller had Jacoby Brissett wrapped up. It's
yeah.
Top 3 worst voice impressions I could ever make, but that's what you're going to get at 8:42 on a Monday morning. Best play I've ever seen Jacoby Brissett make?
Oh, yeah.
I think when you look back on his career, he could win 2 Super Bowls, and I think that play would be in the top 5 or 6 plays that he's ever made. And that might be a bit hyperbole, but just all the factors that you weigh into this, Joey, of the sense of your offense can't do anything. Jacoby Brissett, probably the worst game of the season for him leading up to that point, and the offense not helping him at all. The offensive line really got manhandled, I thought, throughout.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Yeah, very, very surprised by that, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But three things: the escape, the throw, and the catch.
Mm-hmm.
All of them are incredible in their own way. The escape, let's start there. The Colts miss a stunt. Von Miller, free rush, comes in right through the Mark Glowinski gap. He's got Brissett. I mean, he has two hands on Brissett, wrapped him up around the waist. I think it would have been a safety. Would have been really close. Would have been one of those, oh my gosh, he touched them at the half-yard line, so it's not a safety. But a sack there theoretically ends the game. You have no timeouts.
Yep.
So if you go down there, you are effed. He's able to shed Miller, which, again, that is unbelievable in its own self. But to me, the most astonishing part of the play was the throw. Because it's not something where you just shed the sack, scramble out of bounds, throw the ball out of bounds, whatever. No. You realize time, you realize score, you realize that you've created now an unscripted play. And here's an opportunity to finally find T.Y. Hilton, who had one catch in 5 targets up to that point. Chris Harris should be traded for a first-round pick for how he looked on Sunday afternoon against the Colts. And what does Brissett do? On the run, rolling to his right, he throws the ball 40 bleeping yards in the air on a frozen rope to T.Y. Hilton. And obviously Hilton makes a tremendous catch, I guess slightly behind him a little bit, which, again, when you're trying to toe tap, that makes everything even more amazing with that play. So
the end zone view of that throw was really, really cool.
I was glad CBS went to that pretty quickly after that play.
Because when you're watching it from the sideline angle, the usual classic sideline angle, it looks like it was just a straight line throw. Still impressive, but when you look at it from the end zone, you see, holy cow.
Yeah.
He really was truly throwing to that spot of where he was going to be and had to project. You know what I mean? It was crazy.
And, Hilton mentioned after the game he wasn't the first option. Hilton was kind of running a clear-out route. So they wanted to get someone underneath. I'd have to go back and watch the All-22 later in the week to see exactly who the play was designed for. But obviously Von Miller blows that up. And for Brissett to make that play, Joey, because think back, okay, he had not played very well. Just a very blah performance by really everybody on that offense all game long. He just had fumbled 2 drives earlier when you look like you were kind of nearing potential field goal range, and that would have been a huge, huge drive. And Brissett fumbles. And think back to the Oakland game. You start a drive in a similar part of the field. You're trying to go down late in the game, and for the Oakland game, I think it would have been a tying drive. And he throws the pick. So this was a question we had about Jacoby Brissett. Could you lead the big drive when you're down? And that really was the only play that you needed, because then Denver was like, oh, yeah, it's time to commit another horrific penalty in the fourth quarter. And then out of Vinatieri, boom, you're in Vinny's field goal range. But without that play, you lose the football game. I mean, point blank, period. And the escape and the throw and the catch, it was one of the best plays I've seen from a quarterback here in 2019. And Frank Reich mentioned after the game how many quarterbacks in this league can make that play. It's Mahomes, it's Rodgers, it's Wilson, it's Watson, and I don't know if you go much further down the list than that. It was a rare play, and people are going to probably turn off the podcast when I say it, but I tweeted after the game, it reminded me of the Andrew Luck play against the Dolphins last season to Chester Rogers. And it was a question of, could Jacoby make those plays in that critical of a moment? And he absolutely did that for you. He saved you. And I actually even go back to earlier in the game, Joey, when you had the 55-yard field goal in the first half. It wasn't as... I would say Von Miller had a better chance of sacking Brissett there, on the 35-yard play to Hilton, then maybe I'm trying to think of who it was for Denver. I think Malik Reed maybe had him. Maybe it was someone else. It might have been Todd Davis. Had Brissett on the final drive of the first half, and Brissett escapes, dumps it to Hines. Hines takes off for 20 yards. You get 3 points out of that drive. Vinny's 55-yard field goal is all we talk about, and rightfully so. What a huge kick it was. But again, if Brissett doesn't make that play, you don't get 3 points in the first half. And now you're down 13-0, early in the second half. So, un-freaking believable play by Jacoby Brissett. And it'll be on any sort of highlight reel for him in his career, and it will be, like you said, Joey, on any sort of 2019 Colt highlight reel.
When Adam Vinatieri hit not only the field goal at the end of the half, but, of course, the end of the game, I was reminded of the Dumb and Dumber scene. Have you seen Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. You're not a movie guy. I don't know.
How can you be an American or be anybody and not see Dumb and Dumber?
I'm just being cautious with my movie quotes.
I mean, I know I've seen maybe 7 movies in my life, but
that's one of them.
That's one of them. I've seen them multiple times.
When Lloyd comes back up on a little scooter after he sells the paddy wagon, paddy wagon, and Harry says, "Just when I thought you couldn't be any dumber, you go out and totally redeem yourself." That's what I thought when Vinatieri.
I saw a few of those memes.
Yeah,
after the Vinny kick,
when he missed the shank, the first one, hit the one at the before the half, and then of course missing the extra point, and then nailing the 55-yarder. Unreal.
It was weird, Joey. For good and bad reasons, you were in that position because of Adam Vinatieri. The good reasons being the 55-yarder and even the 45-yarder that he made. The bad reasons, of course, being the 45-yarder he missed in the first half, and then he also, had the duck hook extra point. So the first kick he misses, that 45-yarder that never had a prayer. It was 15 yards right of the goalpost, whatever. I mean,
it may have won Mike Vanderjagt.
I was going to say, very similar kick in terms of going right. I think Vandy's might have had a little bit more of a tail, but that was just a straight push. And Tom McMahon is the Broncos special teams coordinator. Used to be the Colts special teams coordinator. He knows Vinny hates nothing more than when guys jump over the line to try to block kicks. That's what Denver did on that first kick. Jumped right over. Honestly, if Vinny kicks that straight, probably gets blocked. Maybe even return for a touchdown. So I'm not condoning the miss, but I think there were a little bit more reasons there and why he missed that kick. Now, the 33-yard extra point was just terrible. Just an absolute terrible kick and a duck hook that wasn't even close to going in. Vinny has kicked it so much better, Joey, since that early start of the year when he missed the 3 extra points and had missed, I think, 1 field goal, maybe 2 field goals, and he had only missed 1 kick in his last 4 games, and that was the 57-yarder against Oakland, or maybe Atlanta, which was obviously a really, really deep kick. So he had kicked so much better. I couldn't believe – I was a little bit shocked how passive Frank Reich got there late.
Oh, man.
And Reich was pretty adamant, he was thinking negative play. Got to avoid a sack, got to avoid a holding penalty. There's no timeouts left. Which it's interesting for Frank. I understand that line of thinking, but it's so polar opposite from Frank Reich. We're just so wired of him being aggressive. And I'm not saying, chuck it to Chris Harris in man coverage, guarding T.Y. Hilton, but you'd found some success with Hines dumping it off to him, or even some of your tight ends. Could you make it a little bit more manageable? Instead of 51, maybe it's 41. Now, the weird thing about Vinny, he's like a golfer that can't hit his wedges. He'd rather be at 160 yards out than 60 yards out. It seems like he'd rather be and I don't know if it's kind of when you're 51 yards out, maybe it's more of a full swing, a full sort of motion.
You're just letting it rip.
Yeah. And I'm thinking this purely from a golf sense. I am horrific inside of 100 yards. If you put 10 balls for me at 80 yards, you put 10 balls for me at 180 yards, there's not much of a difference, which just shows you how pathetic I am of a short gamer. But it almost seems like it's that way with Vinny. He's just a little bit too, I don't know, trying to force it, from 80 yards, or really trying to think about it from, I shouldn't say 80 yards, that's golf. Really trying to think about it from 33 yards on those extra points. So, but that 51-yarder, man, you talk about smooth, you talk about right down the middle.
Well, I mean, it was never a doubt, but I don't know if you were able to keep up with what was going on in Chicago at about the same time.
Yeah.
And so that, I'm sitting there with my family, and we just saw Chicago.
So what did they do again?
They got to, and this shows you the state of Chicago is even worse. They got to where it was going to be about a 41 or 42-yarder, I think.
Okay.
And they were just cool with that. They took a couple knees, they set it up for it to be last second field goal from about 41 or 42 yards out. They even had timeout, and they didn't try to run any more plays to get closer. And everybody's losing their mind saying, and even us included, were saying, you have this history, you haven't been able to figure out the kicker position, and you're all right with even a 41-yarder? Like, you got to get as close as you can, man. There's no chip shots.
Yeah.
He misses it, and then literally 5 or 10 minutes later, the Colts are sitting there at 51 yards, and they're saying, all right, Vinny, let's go. And we're like, holy cow. It's the same thing.
And the one thing about Vinny in this stretch is length has never been an issue. Distance has never been too much of a problem. But still, it was I was stunned by it. And again, Frank Reich said after the game, he was afraid of a holding penalty and afraid of a sack, which I get that. Your offensive line been playing terrible. You had, 6 negative runs. You had 4 sacks. I mean, it was the worst day your offense had all season long.
Yeah.
But it's so much different from the Frank Reich that we're used to. And, I mean, if Vinny misses that kick, is he the kicker in Heinz Field next week?
A lot rode on that. Yeah, I mean, it did.
It's crazy to go there. Maybe that's a bit too drastic, but that's the state of kind of where you are at from a kicking standpoint. But, man, his mental makeup that I think himself is even kind of he's been a little hesitant with this season. What a big-time kick. What a big-time kick. And the 55-yarder in the first half, the 51-yarder there late. When your offense is struggling, you've got to step up. You have to deliver. And there were shaky moments. It was a roller coaster ride of 60 minutes for him. But to deliver like that, that's why he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer.
There were a few drives there, moments in the second, third quarter where I'd have red zone on, then I'd flip back to the Colts game, and I feel like the Broncos were just constantly on the field offensively. I was like, what? Holy God. This is the longest drives ever. But at the end of the day, Kevin, Colts defense came through, got the stops they needed to when they needed to.
Yeah, Denver had a 17-play drive and a 13-play drive.
Yep.
11 combined first downs on those 2 drives. God, and then they had a drive for the third quarter with 5 first downs. The Denver offense with 3 drives in one day with 5 first downs. They were on the field for a lot. I think they won time possession, but for a second straight week, the Colts delivered in the critical moments on the defensive side of the ball. And I think coming into the game, it was all kind of like the defense needs to do its job. I think one of my keys to the game was this defense should dominate. And to hold anybody to 13 points in the NFL, that's doing your job. That is doing your job. And this defense needed to do that. I am obviously much more impressed by what the defense did the 2 weeks prior because I think Denver's offense is one of the more passive, saddest offenses I've seen in the NFL in quite some time. It's makes my eyes bleed watching Denver try to operate offensively. Like Joe Flacco ripped the coaching staff after the game. And I'm thinking to myself, Flacco, I watch you throw more balls into the seats than J.J. Watt does pregame running around any sort of stadium in the NFL. Like, what? I mean, you are a lot to blame. Yes, I get it. 3rd and 5 run there late with Philip Lindsay. That's really, really passive. And Vic Fangio.
Very Vic Fangio thing to do.
That was some Chuck Pagano-ish stuff.
Yeah.
That was a defensive-minded head coach being scared as hell. And, like, I kind of side more with Flacco after the game. You're a 2-5 football team. Go win the freaking game.
Go, man.
Go win the game. And you can still make a prudent play call on 3rd and 5. I'm not saying, like, hell, just throw it to Cortland Sutton. Rock Ya-Sin's probably due for another penalty. Right. I mean.
For sure.
It was just something that it was unbelievable to me, Denver's offensive ineptness. But still, in the critical moments, the Colts delivered. In red zone, 1 of 3 for Denver. On third down, Denver was 2 of 12. I don't think they had a conversion on third down in the second half. And think back to the field position game. Denver had drives there in the fourth quarter where, and I wrote these down, they had drives where they got to the Indianapolis 34-yard line, 48-yard line, 43-yard line. So 3 drives on the Colts side of the field. And then they also had a drive that started at their own 45.
Yep.
0 points. They didn't even attempt a field goal on any of those 4 drives. Like, they're on the fringe of it all fourth quarter long. One more field goal probably ends the game. And Brandon McManus has got a big leg, former Colt kicker. And you're able to make those big-time plays. Justin Houston just tormented the Denver offensive. That Denver offensive line sucks.
Really, really bad.
And Ben Banigou, I thought, stepped up majorly. And
Banigou was flying yesterday.
Yeah, he was.
Holy
he
cow.
was. And I'm sure we'll get in some trade deadline questions and Twitter questions. But 4 yards per rush you allowed, I think, to Lindsey and Freeman combined. That's not horrible to me. It's not, like, unbelievable, but I think you would have signed up for it because that's what Denver can do. Denver can run the football if they can do anything on the offensive side of the ball. So, again, to only allow 4 yards per rush, job well done for this defense. And you stepped up in the critical moments. And for this defense, when you are going to allow, the 17-play drive and the 13-play drive, those 2 drives ended in 2 field goals. So, in the Matt Eberflus scheme, again, it's bend but don't break. And you bent a little bit, but when you hold to 3, the dam isn't breaking. And so, again, job well done to this defense. I don't want to sit here and act like what I saw on Sunday out of this defense makes me think they're a top 10 unit, but they did what they needed to do coming into this game. If you hold a team in the NFL to 13 points, you should win the football game.
And they did.
I think it's the 15 points for the Colts. Fewest amount of points they've scored in a decade in a game they've won.
Yeah,
you don't see the Colts win many 13-10ers.
Was that 15 one? Was that against Baltimore when Vinny kicked those 5?
So that was over a decade ago.
That was in the playoffs, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the divisional round in Baltimore. This was the season opener against Jacksonville, I believe, in 2009. They won a game where they scored. It was like 14-10 or something like that.
You had 19-9 on Thursday night. You had 15-13 yesterday. There's some
scored 19 against the Titans.
Yeah, there's some weird scores.
Yeah.
Weird scores. All right, those things that you liked, Kevin. Still some things that you didn't like, even from the win, and you got to start with the rookie Rock Yassin. A little bit of a rough day out there on an island with Cortland Sutton, like you mentioned. I believe 4 penalties on him yesterday. 5 penalties on the rookie.
4 called, 4 accepted penalties.
Okay.
5 called on him.
Okay, so it's truly starting to be a kind of a welcome to the NFL rook.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd have some headline maybe associated with his name. Maybe you can think of that.
If they would have lost, probably.
Yeah,
but.
you would have been right there. Joey, it was one of the most flag-filled performances I've ever seen for an NFL player. I'm sure Tart Glenn was whistled for a few false starts in one game back in the day, and I think it's Laramie Tunsil and Rock Yassin tied for the most committed penalties in the NFL through 7 games. Honestly, it reminded me of homeboy, who has all the kids, Antonio Cromartie in London.
Yep.
He committed, I think, 3 flags on one drive and finally got benched. I think he got cut the next day. Pretty sure he went shopping in Paris when the Colts were over in London, which I think was a big no-no. I don't think Paris and London are that close to each other.
Doesn't seem like it, no.
I mean, it was awful by Rock. It was, Adam Vinatieri. If Adam Vinatieri in the Chargers game and Eric Ebron in the Raiders game had a kid, that would have been Rock Yassin on Sunday.
Not great.
5 flags, 56 yards, I think, in penalty yardage, what those flags led to. Cortland Sutton had 3 catches, and I must say, Joey, when the game started, Pierre Desir is inactive. Quincy Wilson is a healthy scratch. And I always do this on the first drive of the game. I always am kind of a big coverage guy. Okay, what are they doing coverage-wise?
Yes.
Who's playing in those coverages? And when I see Rock Yassin not go to one side of the field to start the game, I'm kind of like, wow, is he really shadowing Cortland Sutton? And then Cortland Sutton goes into the slot, and he's shadowing him in the slot. And, like, that's something that you don't usually see. Mm-hmm. Chris Harris shadowed T.Y. Hilton on Sunday. Chris Harris didn't go in the slot with Hilton. Rock Ya-Sin was shadowing him all over the place, which I love doing things differently on the defensive side of the ball. But, man, the fact that you kept on riding that the whole game, I was like, what in the world? Oh, wait, Rock Ya-Sin is still shadowing Cortland Sutton after penalty number 3, after penalty number 4, after penalty number 5?
Is that just because of lack of options, or is that truly everyone I know in a win, people are going to say, oh, Frank Reich, that just shows the trust in his players and that he's going to have faith in them throughout? But or was it really just because they're like, I don't know what the hell else to do? Just, survive with him.
It's a very fair question, but my thinking is this. Who else is beating you offensively for Denver?
Yeah, that's true.
Denver has nobody. Can you name me the Denver Broncos wideouts?
I think there's a Gallup in there, right there.
Deshaun Hamilton, and then there was honestly, I have to look up some of these names. Number 11 was fast. I remember him. Spencer, Winfrey, and Brown. Fred Brown. He's been your neighbor for 37 years. And he's one of Denver's wideouts. Denver had 5 wideouts. None of them wore any number in the 80s. Is that dying? Receivers wearing numbers in the 80s?
The teens are making an emergence. Yeah. For sure.
I was stunned that the Colts continued to do that. It looked like there was a little bit of over-the-top help for Rock Ya-Sin late in that game, but I'm not even sure if Flacco targeted Cortland Sutton those final few drives. Rock, after the game, spoke to the media, which is, commendable by him. He mentioned that he was losing press coverage. Losing that early leverage in the play. And when he loses that, then he starts to get grabby. And that contributed to the penalties. And I guess the question is just pressing Cortland Sutton is different than pressing a guy at Temple or pressing a guy at Presbyterian. And I think that was the question we had about Rock Ya-Sin coming into the NFL. Man coverage was his strength, but there's a step up in competition. And you watched Rock Ya-Sin in camp. I watched him in camp. I mean, he dominated Devin Funchess in training camp.
Yep.
But it was weird. We didn't really see anything in the preseason from that. And then also, we haven't really seen any dominance out of him in the regular season. I don't think it's not like he looks lost in coverage. His technique just breaks down at the final moment.
Right.
I didn't think all the penalties were 100% obvious. I thought a few were questionable, but to me, it just got to the point of, wait, why are you still putting them on an island? I'm not saying throw Kenny Moore out there. I'm not saying throw Marvell Tell out there, but play some zone, have Hooker, Odom right there over the top. Yeah, it was one of the worst games I've seen from an NFL player in quite some time.
Another thing that you didn't like, and it's really interesting, Kevin, was the offensive execution for the Colts, because you have the weeks like last week against Houston in Kansas City where they have a clear plan. Their plan is working. They stick with the plan, and it's almost flawless. And then you go out in a game like yesterday, a game like Oakland, and it's just clunky.
Yeah.
They can't find the rhythm.
Really, really clunky. We heard all this talk about Denver's defense. Top 5 unit. Number 3 ranked against the pass. Now, they're middle of the pack against the run. So it's not like they really struggle getting after the quarterback. So they are good in not giving up a whole lot of yardage, but they haven't been dominant, across the board. So I was interested to see how the Colts would fare. I thought they'd struggle throwing the football, which they definitely did, but I thought they'd be able to run it, and I thought they'd be able to protect Jacoby Brissett. They ran it okay. 4.1 is the final number. Brissett did average 5.7 scrambling, so you're probably a little bit less than 4, which isn't terrible, 4 yards per carry. But Brissett was sacked 4 times. 4 times in 25 pass attempts. Mm-hmm. And think about how many he avoided. I mean, it was not a good day for the offensive line. That's where I put the biggest culprit for the issues offensively. I thought your wideouts struggled to beat Denver coverage. We talked about Chris Harris against T.Y. Hilton, but just your other wideouts in general, man. You had 11 targets to your wideouts. 11. 4 catches.
Man.
That's awful.
Yeah.
People were tweeting at me during the game. This feels like the Jacksonville game from last year. I wasn't thinking that totally. For one, I think Jacksonville's defense is much more talented than Denver's defense at every level. We talked about coming into the game. Von Miller had a very quiet year. Very quiet season. Look at his numbers. He pretty much showed up in one game this season. He was unbelievable yesterday.
He was all over the place.
I mean, he absolutely. We're talking stops in the run game, tackles for loss. Obviously I think he had a sack and a half. He was huge in that game. But it comes down to me, the 4 sacks and then the negative runs. You had, I think, 6, maybe 7 negative running plays. That was the Oakland game. Oakland, I think you had 4, maybe 5 negative runs. And you didn't really sustain drives very deep into Denver territory. You kind of did that last year against Jacksonville. Jacksonville was just kind of Frank Reich was just like, I'm going to go for everything. And I felt like you could have settled for some field goals that were you were more inside the 30-yard line, I felt like, against Jacksonville than you were against Denver. I thought it was probably the poorest game Jacoby Brissett's played all season. And we can sit here and say the play he made was effing incredible.
Yep.
But we can still look at the 60 minutes of football and realize that was probably the poorest game he's played all season long. I feel like with him, for a 6'4" quarterback, he gets quite a few balls batted down.
Yeah.
He had a few balls that were batted down. Miss Hilton on a 3rd down. A couple inaccurate plays. What was he? 15 to 25, so that's 60%. I don't think there was any drops. Maybe I'm forgetting one, but I don't recall anything too blatant. So yeah, it was, and that's kind of what I sort of expected. We talked about Denver hadn't allowed a 300-yard passer all season long. So I didn't expect a whole lot of the pass offense, but I go back to the O-line, Joey. I mentioned it on Thursday's podcast, the difference between Denver's defense and Houston's defense, back-to-back games. Denver's better in the secondary. They aren't as strong in the front 7. So I expected better out of the front 7, or I expected better out of the offensive line for the Colts. They played worse than they did against Houston last week. And your offensive line continues to be so healthy. I'm just thinking to myself, what happens when you suffer that injury? I mean, the Colts again played another team that loses an offensive lineman during a game. It seems to happen every week for the opponent, and yet the Colts continue to be just amazingly healthy up front. So, yes, the poorest day from the offense all season long, and thankfully you're able to survive it.
A few interesting names on the inactive list that you got about an hour and a half or so before kickoff, likes of Quincy Wilson, Deon Cain, which is a popular topic last week for us. What do you think about that?
Well, let's start with Cain. We've touched a lot on his struggles this season and his quietness, and what it came down to is this: Paris Campbell's back healthy, and they felt like that they needed Ashton Doolin on special teams more than they needed Deon Cain. Deon Cain doesn't play special teams. He does not play special teams. Now, early in the season, you dressed Deon Cain when everyone was healthy. Think back to the Chargers game. Devin Funchess was dressing, and you still dressed Deon Cain. So you felt like early in the year there was a role for him offensively, even though he doesn't play special teams. Now you've gotten to the point where he doesn't play special teams, and you don't think there's a role worthy enough for him to dress offensively. Now, if you'd have told me before the game Deon Cain was inactive, I would have expected more reps for Paris Campbell. He played 8 plays. 8 plays, one target.
Yep.
Doolin, I think, played 4 snaps offensively. So, look, it's been a disappointing start to the 2019 season, point blank for Deon Cain. It's still very early in his NFL career. With Cain and even with Quincy Wilson, I think back to Kamoko Turi last year. him being a healthy scratch at one point during the season. So I don't know if you're trying to send a bit of a message to Deon Cain. You know, he tweeted after the game last week, still on a mission, you know, insert emoji there.
Lion emoji, rocket ship emoji.
Something like that. Yeah. Good call there.
Yeah.
But he had 32 targets in that game against Houston and no catches. It's still a bit of a head scratcher when you hear people inside of the Colts building believe that Deon Cain, if he was in the 2019 draft, he would be the most talented wideout in that draft.
And then he's inactive.
And he's a healthy scratch.
Yeah.
So clearly some growth still needed there with Deon Cain. With Quincy Wilson, the first thought was, honestly, trade block to me. That was my first thought. You know, I think we're seeing it tonight. Obviously, a much more of a heralded name, but Kenyon Drake not traveling for the Dolphins against your Steelers. He will obviously be traded before 4 o'clock tomorrow. Now, having said that, what value are you getting for Quincy Wilson?
I mean, got to be a team that's just, like Philadelphia? Somebody just desperate for some help in the secondary?
Yeah, I mean, like, you pray you get a 7th-round pick. I mean, I don't even know what you would get for Quincy Wilson.
Right.
And as much as I want to be like, oh, this is a wake-up call, this is Kamoko Turi, Quincy Wilson, this is your 3rd year in the NFL. I know you're 23 years old, but do the wake-up calls still need to be coming?
Yeah. Time to set that alarm, man. Set it yourself. Let's go.
And I would say maybe the most alarming part of the Wilson healthy scratch, you play Shaq Taylor over him, an undrafted free agent. You play Roland Milligan, a 2nd-year undrafted free agent. Those two guys played 0 defensive snaps. So then in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, well, they must have played big roles on special teams. Milligan did. Shaq Taylor didn't play one freaking snap in the game. He didn't play a snap on special teams. So, like, is Shaq Taylor, like, needed as a backup more than Quincy Wilson?
Right.
Because all I hear about is Quincy Wilson's versatility. He can play 4 or 5 spots for us. That's so valuable on game day. He can play slot. He can be a dime linebacker, all these sorts of things. Plus, I'm thinking Pierre Desir is out. I'd want the long corner as an option. Because if Rocky Sin goes down in that game, that means Marvell Tell.
He was out there a little bit, wasn't he?
Oh, played a ton more than Quincy Wilson.
Right, yeah.
You know, obviously more than Quincy Wilson. Marvell Tell played 3 snaps all season. Then he plays nearly 40 yesterday.
Yeah, I kept seeing 39 out there. I was like, damn.
In the nickel package. So, just a major head scratcher to me on Quincy Wilson. I think it's got to be trade bait. But then I watched yesterday's game. I'm thinking, why the hell would you trade him? Desir has battled injuries throughout his entire career. Was very healthy last year, but injuries have been an issue for him. We now see a hamstring to where he plays against the Texans without missing a single practice, or with missing all 3 practices. Then last week, he practiced twice. He was limited twice in practice last week, tested it out, and just didn't feel as good as he did the week before, which is kind of interesting. Misses all of practice 1 week, plays, misses just 1 practice the next week and doesn't play. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, Desir's your long corner. He's battled injuries. We just saw Rocky Sin have a nightmarish game. Don't you need some insurance? Don't you want a little bit of the longer sort of... What is the serious value you're going to get in return for Quincy Wilson? If it's a 6th-round pick, I'd rather have a guy that... Now, maybe they've lost all faith in him, which... Has he been inconsistent this year? Without a doubt. Has he been that bad? No. I don't know, man. It's...
We're going to find out.
We'll ask Frank Reich today. I'll ask Matt Eberflus tomorrow.
Can't wait to hear that response.
Pray for a candid answer, folks. But honestly, maybe the answer we'll get is at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Right. Yep. Trade deadline coming up at 4 on Tuesday.
It was, I would say the happiest guy on that inactive list yesterday was probably Tyquan Lewis. He practices all week and is still out. And yet we're all worried about Desir, Wilson, and Cain. But again, Tyquan Lewis had seemingly a healthy scratch. So,
interesting.
You were a really healthy football team yesterday. I thought the inactive list would be pretty ho-hum. Like I expected Doolin. I expected Shaq Taylor. Like, I expected those guys. Not basically, it meant more to the Colts for special teams with Doolin over Cain. But then on the flip side, I thought I was going to say that again, and then Shaq Taylor doesn't play a single snap. Maybe he's your backup nickel. I could have sworn Quincy Wilson can play nickel.
Right. Yep. Again, the diversity. Who knows?
Yeah.
But we're going to find out.
Mm-hmm.
By tomorrow, like you said, trade deadline at 4. You want to get into some Twitter questions?
Yes.
All right.
Let's do 'em.
All right, from Jordan, was there a reason Quincy Wilson was inactive?
Yeah, we got a ton of these questions, so I guess I'll just address it all here. Pretty much just talked about it. With Wilson, I think it comes down to, honestly, more of a trade sense. With Deon Cain, I think it comes down to more of there's no special teams help with him, and he doesn't play a big enough role for you offensively. I think those were kind of there are other reasons, but I think those were the big reasons why both those guys were healthy scratches, and they were healthy scratches. Pierre Desir was injured. Those two guys were not on the injury report all week long.
From Smokey Black, with a half of the season in the books, and knowing the Texans have injuries to Watt, Tunsil, and of course their secondary, what's your confidence level the Colts win this division?
What a great name.
Smokey Black.
God, I wish people would call me that. Here comes Smokey Black.
Smokey Kev.
Yeah. I might try that.
All right.
My confidence in the Colts winning the division?
Yep.
I think it's gone up after yesterday, right? That Watt injury is huge. Is Tunsil hurt bad?
I don't know. That's the first I've seen of Tunsil.
I saw him get.
I knew about
he went
Watt.
in the medical tent late in the game. God. That Watt injury is huge. Houston's got to win shootouts. That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
I always thought the saving grace for Houston was this. They had like 5 or 6 guys that were really, really freaking good at football.
Mm-hmm.
Hopkins, Watson, Tunsil, Watt. Obviously losing Clowney. He was one of those guys as well. And now I'm just kind of like, they're starting to lose some of those guys. So I know the division all won yesterday, but the Colts' chances of winning this division, I think it improved. The sneaky important game will actually come down to Jacksonville, because you still play Jacksonville twice, whereas you have the lead on Houston and you have the lead on Tennessee because you've beaten them, both of them. You should beat Jacksonville. I'm not sitting here acting like Jacksonville is a true contender, but if for some reason you lose that game at home in 3 weeks, that is a huge game for this division. Now you give Jacksonville hope. You bring the rest of the division back into it. That's a game where, there'll be 58,000 people inside of Lucas Oil Stadium for that game, but it'll mean a lot more than that.
Yep. From Casey, are you more bummed at the Notre Dame loss or happy that Tiger won?
Oh, my gosh, Casey. I was so freaking mad at Notre Dame. I don't know who I was more mad at, Notre Dame or Greek's Pizzeria at 49th in College that was the first time I probably ever put any sort of company on blast. For they look like Joe Flacco and Vic Fangio trying to handle pizza orders on Saturday night. Saturday night. I'm trying to get a 7 o'clock, 7:44 kick. I'm trying to be smart. I waited an hour. I got to go back there to get my money back, I think. You had people just yell. People in Michigan gear, Notre Dame gear, just yelling at them. Yeah, it was pathetic, man.
Yeah.
All right, let's get off my lawn, guy, right there. Notre Dame was just tore. I want to cuss so much. I was happy. Tiger cured all. I would rather see Tiger win than Notre Dame win at this point in my life.
Okay.
Because Tiger's not going to win that many more times. And Notre Dame was what? They were going to need a lot of help to get back in the playoffs.
For sure.
A lot of help to get back in the playoffs. So as much as I was disappointed in the Irish, Tiger winning it gave me a soft smile. Just a nice, genuine.
Good way to end your Sunday.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah. Did you get pizza last night to make up for it or anything? Or
No, I got a burger in the press box. I'm trying to think of what I ate yesterday. Just a burger in the press box.
All right. From Hunter, he says, I know the roof open, window closed is undefeated. What about our color rush uniforms? Also, what's the deal with Paris Campbell? I think I expected much more from him. I know he got snaps and was targeted, just not what I thought he'd be.
Color rush, I think you're 2-1. You beat Miami last year. You lost to Denver the year before that. Paris Campbell, like I said, 8 snaps, 1 target. You'd think there'd be a few more scripted things in the game plan for him. I know he was limited at practice all last week, but my thinking is if he's on the field, you try and use him a little bit. So I'll be interested to see how much more he plays and how much more he's involved to see what his role is going to be.
Sam wants to know, are you a bit concerned we've won all these close games? Could very much come back to bite us.
It goes back to the whole playing to your competition, Joey. I think there's a lot to take from winning one-possession games. I do. But at the same time, I keep on coming back to there's a standard that you should play to. And the Colts are not playing to that standard on a week-in, week-out basis. And I know full well the NFL is more parity than any other professional sports league. And anything can happen week to week. But you look at the other teams in the AFC playoff picture, they are winning multiple games by 2 scores. The Colts haven't. So, are you playing with fire? What happens when your opponents don't commit double-digit penalties every single game? Because I know the Colts had a lot of penalties yesterday. Denver had 10 as well. Denver had 7 penalties in the fourth quarter. 7.
It's a bad team, folks.
That's not a good Denver played like they were 2-6. The Colts shouldn't go play like they're 2-6 too. The Colts should be better than that. And yesterday you played like you were a 2-6 football team, or maybe a 3-5 football team, because you're able to pull out the win.
Craig asks, were you worried with conservative play calling on the last drive? 51-yard field goal is no gimme. # glad Vinny made it.
Yeah, I was. I thought you needed a few more yards there, man. And I thought even with no timeouts, you could have handled that better. I also thought this. Should Denver have called that last timeout?
When did they do that?
So, third down play happens. Marlon Mack gets stuffed. I'm going to look up how much time was left on that play. Marlon Mack gets stuffed. No gain. 32 seconds to go. Brissett starts to kind of sprint off the field because that's, 32 seconds, still plenty of time to run on your field goal unit, but that's a little chaotic. Vinny's running on there for a 51-yarder.
Fire drill.
Yeah, it is the definite fire drill. Denver got the ball back, and the 2 plays that they ran, Roncalli High School could have run 2 better plays than they did there late. It's not like they were going to get in field goal range.
No.
And if you're already going to be passive and you've just coached like you've coached the previous 4 drives, why not force Vinatieri to make a 51-yard field goal while he's sprinting onto the field?
For sure. No,
I'm
with you.
Yeah, something to think about. But yeah, I was surprised Frank Reich was that passive. I understand the holding and sack and nervousness about that, but that's a whole lot of faith in Adam Vinatieri, and it goes against a lot of what Frank Reich believes in. It's just
It was odd.
Yeah, it was much different. It was more of a Chuck Pagano coach decision than a Frank Reich coach decision.
From OGH says, hey, KB, why does it often seem like the Colts play down to a supposed weaker opponent? All we hear about is how well coached the Colts are, and yet they often come out flat when it isn't a big-time game. Big fan of the podcast. Keep up the good work. Cheers from Denmark.
Oh!
International.
I love it. Across the pond, Kevin's Corner. OGH, thank you for the question. Appreciate that. So I've been thinking about this a lot because I do think the Colts are a well-coached football team. I don't know if they are the most talented team. I think that, and I would have to crunch more numbers on this, but I'd probably put the Colts in the 8 to 12 range of most talented teams. They are the 2nd seed right now in the AFC. I don't think they're the 2nd most talented team in the AFC. And I don't think that necessarily we should expect them to be the most. It's year 3 of a major rebuild. I'm not saying Chris Ballard he should have more talent on this football team. I just don't think there is a lot of talent. Not a lot of talent to be 5-2, winning games by 2-3 scores.
Yeah.
Do I expect some games to be? Did I expect Denver to be a 2-score win? Yes. So I think that's where you're at. I think you have playoff caliber talent, but I don't think you have bye playoff talent. And so that's kind of why I think that we've seen as many one-possession games. Because I think you're disciplined. I think you are well coached. I think those areas, you protect the football well. All those areas check boxes for me. But I just don't think you are a top 6. I guess right now you're a top 4 based off playoff seeding. I don't think you're a top 4, talented team in the NFL.
Billy wants to know, with all the rumors flying around about Brady potentially leaving, if he goes elsewhere and wins a championship, does this put him in the realm of the most dominant athlete in history? A little off topic from our Colts, but just wanted your thoughts on what Shefty said.
Yeah, Brady doesn't need to win any more titles. He's already one of the most dominant athletes in sports history, right? I mean, he won 6 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
We can make an argument about Belichick, Brady. I don't care. The NFL, no quarterback wins as much as Brady's won. Yeah, and especially in a modern era where there is so much parity, and there's always been so much turnover in New England, especially offensively.
The YouTube comments.
What a wild question.
Yep.
I know. That's going to hurt our rating on YouTube, isn't it?
From Blind Penguin. I was at the Andrew Luck retirement game, he says. The spirit was as low as you could imagine, and every Colts fan was walking around like a zombie. Do you think Colts Nation realizes how lucky we are with Jacoby? As a fan, personally, I don't need championships or playoff wins. I just want my team to be relevant and have hope for the future. I think Jacoby gives us all the above. Plus, he seems like an A-plus personality and leadership qualities. I live in Chicago and have watched the Bears quarterback situation for the last 20 years. We are spoiled. Let's not take it for granted.
Wow.
I like it.
Bit of preaching there. Obviously, the Colts have been very fortunate at the quarterback position for the past 20 or so years. I would say some fans would probably disagree with that, though. Like it sounds like he just wants them to be a little bit better than okay. I guess it goes back to the Indiana Pacers debate. Would you rather be the Pacers or would you rather be the Dallas Mavericks? Like the Mavericks have drafted in the lottery here recently, but they also won a world championship. I think everyone would say you'd rather win a world championship than, make it to 2 Eastern Conference Finals every 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Being really bad, that sucks as a fan. But I think feeling that glory or, being at that top level, I just think that would be something that you would want to get to on a not semi-annual, more like a once every 10 years sort of thing. But, yes, the Colts have definitely been fortunate at the quarterback position.
From Richard Bilby. Says, Brissett's play reminded me of you saying, quote, Andrew Luck makes 3 to 5 jaw-dropping plays a game, and that we need to see from Brissett, end quote. I think we have one that we can draw upon now.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Could not agree more. That was one of the plays. That is a Luck-like play. That is a Mahomes-like play. Insert whoever you want to insert in there. That was jaw-dropping. That was incredible. It was off script. It was at such a critical time. I go back to the mistake he made against Oakland and then the fumble he had earlier in the game against Houston or against Denver. You've got one more chance. Your offense hasn't done anything all day long. You go create something, and he created that. It was it's one of the best plays I've seen a Colts player make in quite some time.
Clayton Clifford asks, do you think Ballard regrets getting rid of Jalen Collins and Nate Hairston this offseason? When making those moves, I don't think he envisioned Quincy being a healthy scratch and Marvell Tell and Shaq Taylor playing 40 snaps a game.
Well, he could have kept Shaq Taylor, or he could have kept Jalen Collins over Shaq Taylor. That was a decision the Colts made. Shaq Taylor got hurt late in the preseason. I thought he was having a better preseason than Jalen Collins. So I think Jalen Collins you can throw out. Nate Hairston, that would be the only other argument. Getting a 6th-round pick for Hairston, I thought was pretty good. But, yeah, right now you are scrambling a little bit at that cornerback position, and you really need Desir and Kenny Moore to stay healthy. Those guys' health are vitally important.
Scotty says, with Ricky Jean-Francois in 2015 and Zach Pascal now, can we talk about the nice prospect funnel the Colts have built with France? The French connection seems alive and well. Might it be time we start thinking about Ursay the same way we do about R.C. Buford?
Was I an eagle pronouncing Pascal in the French sense?
I didn't catch it.
Pascal, he had the huge kick return to start the game,
Yeah,
but
he did.
What do you have, 2 targets, 1 catch?
Yeah, a little bit more of a quiet game from Pascal.
Right. There's not a huge international flavor on the old Colts roster, but yeah.
Aaron says, what happened to all those crossing routes from last week, especially with Campbell back and with the offense struggling? I was surprised not to see a few similar plays to what worked for us last week.
I thought Denver's defense from a secondary standpoint was really good, and Houston secondary, I think, sucks. Just flat out. No Bradley Roby, Jonathan Joseph getting banged up in that game. I think they're just terrible. So, yeah, that's why I would say you saw what you saw on Sunday. You know, I think we continue to have a question about the Colts wideouts when you're playing better secondaries, and especially one that's able to take away Hilton, like the Colts or like Denver was able to do with Chris Harris. Can your other guys win? And the Colts didn't win at all on Sunday.
Joshua Sutton wants to know, what is one realistic trade move you would like to see and feel it could really help the Colts down the stretch and in the playoffs?
You know, before yesterday, I was pretty adamant about trading for an edge rusher.
Yeah.
But I thought Banagoo gave you some good minutes.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's something to where that all of a sudden means you're out of the trade market. I don't think that. You know, I probably put edge rusher, maybe corner, maybe receiver, you know, kind of on that list. But it's probably a little bit less than 50% that the Colts make a move.
Zach Palmer says, first drive of the game, we had a 4th and 1 and chose to take the 3 points. Missed. What mindset do you think Frank was in? Think he sensed this would be a close one with the Broncos coming off 10 days rest?
It's a good question, Zach. I was okay with the field goal there. Obviously, Vinny misses it. I think if you get an early lead there, it's just a totally different flow of the game. You know, I talked about it on Thursday about when you play teams that are in kind of dire situations like Denver, if you can get early leads on them, it's just monumental for your psyche and their psyche going down a bad path and all of those things. But, yeah, it's something to where it was a little bit against Frank Reich's thinking. Maybe he just thought points were going to be at a premium all day and felt like he needed to get some early points going up against that defense. I was a little surprised. I think if the Colts would have lost that game, that would have been a question afterwards of like, hey, do you think about going for it on 4th and 1?
From Laura, she says, she starts with a rocky scene. Should we chalk his performance up to just being one of those games, or are there more serious concerns moving forward? Does his performance make it less likely Quincy Wilson gets traded?
Yeah, Laura, I think it should be less likely that you trade Quincy Wilson. I think definitely it should be. With Rock, I don't, you know, if you're going to tell me a guy has 5 flags in a game, gives up 3 catches for 72 yards, that's obviously just so alarming. And as alarming as that stat line should be, I don't think I'm totally there in like being, Rock Ya-Sin's a bust. He sucks. Waste of a draft pick. That's horrible. I'm not going there at all with him. So I guess that would mean I'm closer to chalking up as like, this is probably a 1-game thing. But I do think there is a question of like, you're stepping up in competition from what you dealt with in college. How can you handle that on a consistent basis? Especially if the Colts are going to throw him into the role that they put him in on Sunday, which was shadowing a guy in Cortland Sutton, who is a nice receiver in this league. I don't think we look at him as a top 10 or 15 receiver in this league, but he is a nice young wideout. So yeah, I don't think it's anything just like freak out about, but there's reason, I guess, to have a little bit of concern considering just the sort of competition you played against in college.
Felipe wants to know, do you think that Reich's play calling might be a bit telling about what the team really thinks about Jacoby and his potential? It really seems to indicate a bit of reluctance to put the game in his hands. If I'm reading this right, I wonder what it means for the team's future.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fair question. And I also think it's Frank Reich saying to himself of like, all right, got a strong run game, normally have a good offensive line, belief in that unit, that's how we're going to win. But I do think there has been a bit of hesitancy to maybe truly open things up with this offense from a vertical standpoint. I don't think Frank Reich is all the way there. Like, hey, I don't believe in Jacoby Brissett as the future, so I'm going to call a bunch of dink and dunk passes, and that's how we're going to go. I don't think it's all the way on that belief, but I do think there is some sort of belief in other areas right now of your offense, and that's probably a reason that I've mentioned before. This Colts team should be very open to what that quarterback market looks like in 2020. I think to truly evolve as an offense.
Matt Voles asks, what position group for the Colts needs to be addressed most before the trade deadline?
I would say edge rusher still, but after yesterday, corner and wideout maybe go up on that list. I don't want to have too much of a recency bias with that answer there, but I still come back to, can you find the speed rusher? And another thing I think we have to remember, Joey, is this. People are like, Ballard loves his draft picks, wants all of that. Are all your draft picks going to continue to make the roster?
There's going to be some misses in there, right?
Right, and just from a numbers standpoint. I mean, last year you had a 6th-round pick in Gary Green, 7th-round picks in Jackson Barton. They weren't close to making the roster. So just from a pure quantity standpoint, when you get to a 90-man roster and you have the amount of roster continuity that the Colts are starting to have from year to year, yes, you can obviously use those back-end draft picks to trade up within the draft, but I also think to myself, like, man, the 6th-round pick, that might not mean as much. Yes, it means something in trade value, but it could also mean a lot in terms of just finding a proven veteran during the middle of the season.
Matthew August says, thoughts on Banigou? Seemed like he played really well to me.
Yeah, agreed. I thought Banigou was one of your bright spots individually, without a doubt. Your rookies played a lot. Banigou played a lot. Okereke started at the Sam linebacker and played a whole lot. EJ Speed, no defensive snaps, did have a big block on the Zach Pascal 47-yard kick return. Obviously, Rocky Yassin played a ton. Boy, that Corey Willis injury.
Tough.
Worry about that. Foot injury for him. Hopefully we'll get an update on that. But, yeah. And then Marvell Tell was the other rookie that definitely played a lot.
Interesting one from Logan here. He asks, do you think Glowinski is the right guard of the future, or should they draft a guard? He seems to be the weakest link.
I think that's fair. He is the weakest link on this line. The Colts re-signed him to a 3-year deal back in January. Joey, I've been clamoring. Last year I certainly did it, take an offensive tackle a little bit higher. In the back of my mind, as much as I would want kind of because I'm of the belief you need to draft an offensive lineman in the first 3 rounds in April 2020. As much as I believe that should be a true tackle, I'm now starting to think, like, could you find a better version of Joe Haig? That tackle guard, Joe Wrights, from 6 or 7 years ago. Can you find that? And could that maybe be your option of, okay, if Glowinski continues to struggle, you have more of a guard option, but you also have a guy that could play tackle in a pinch as well. So I want to see the rest of the season play out.
Jacob Rush with an either or here. Was Vinny more impressive or concerning?
Oh, that's a good one. When you win, it's always got to be more impressive. But yeah, there are definitely a few questions that flared up from that one. I'll be very curious to see how he kicks in Heinz Field. You would know better than most, Joey, but I think kickers tend to have some struggles in that outdoor stadium. So yeah, because he only kicked outdoors once.
Mm-hmm.
Since the strike, I guess yesterday you had the roof open.
Yeah, let me check the forecast here real quick for
Heinz action.
Yeah,
I think obviously it comes down to more of a wind thing than a temperature thing, but
well, Sunday's supposed to be partly cloudy and 46 for a high, so you would expect probably a little bit of a draft at least.
Yes, something, up against the rivers there in Pittsburgh. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely reasons to have questions after that game. It was impressive, his resiliency and the redemption that we've talked about, but still, you miss a 33-yard extra point. You've missed the most extra points in the league right now. So I think I mentioned it after week 2, Joey. I don't think we'll ever be out of the waters totally with this Adam Vinatieri thing. I that's just how I feel about it. You're going to have some outdoor venues, especially if you get into the playoffs, and I think it's just kind of the state of where his game's at. In a weird way, it's almost like Tiger Woods. Like, Tiger Woods can have the brilliance that we saw on Sunday, but his body is just breaking down that he could wake out of the bed and look like Joe Flacco on the sideline late in the game where they're stretching his neck out, and that could be the difference between him playing or not. Like Max Scherzer wakes up with what? A little crank in his neck and doesn't pitch in the World Series? Like that's kind of where you're at, I think, with a 46-year-old guy.
Yep. From Victor, only 3 guys played snaps at corner yesterday. I know that Denver doesn't have much of wide receiver, but isn't that approach too risky? With a coaching staff that looks for versatility, what do you think was the mindset behind such an inflexible personnel?
I think it's a really good question. The reason is how much you believe in your safeties. Safety snap counts. Hooker plays 62 of 73, so not much of a pitch count for him. Geathers plays 49 of 73. George Odom plays 35 of 73, and then Kari Willis, who left early, played 32 snaps. So you had 4 safeties play nearly half. All of them nearly got 50% playing time. That's why you only played 3 corners. And I think the Pierre Desir injury contributed to that.
Hayden wants to know, was Quincy Wilson and Pierre Desir both healthy and active? So we talked about that.
But again, Desir was injured.
Right.
Wilson was not. I want to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page with that.
Okay, yeah. It just says, I think I saw something say they were. Wants to know if that was true. He says, love the podcast. Listen to all the episodes this year.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's loyal.
For sure. Thanks, Hayden.
I wish we could find that out and, send out
yeah.
prize.
From Conroy, what the hell is going on with our receiving corp? Corp? He says, okay. He spells it core, but then adds the SES, so corpses. I don't know if that's a Halloween thing from Conroy.
Some could argue, yeah.
Are we going to trade for a wide receiver or a D end?
They're not going to trade for a wide. I'd be stunned, honestly, if they traded for a wide out. Funchess is coming back in what? You got 2 more games without him. At Pittsburgh, home to Miami. Bless you. I mean, you should be able to beat Miami with Joey and I running 35 routes, honestly.
That would be fun. Yeah, fun little promotion.
Yeah.
Just come see Kevin's Corner, get their brains smashed.
Yeah. Hopefully the color rush is a red jersey for me that game. The lack of development in Deon Cain, the Paris Campbell struggles early in the season, and I know injuries have played into that. We know what the Colts have in Chester Rogers and Zach Pascal, right? I mean, I think we know where the ceiling is for both of those guys. When teams take away Hilton, this has been a constant issue. You felt like Funchess, Cain, and Campbell were going to kind of end it. Cain and Campbell have not. We'll see what happens when Funchess gets back in a couple weeks. But I think it's just kind of the reality of what the whiteout group looks like right now.
Last one here that I have, interesting one looking forward. It's from Aaron. It says, morning, Kevin. Colts escaped with the win yesterday, thank goodness. Looking forward to the game at the Steelers. What will we focus on, especially offensively, as we head to a place that has been a historical house of horrors for us?
Well, maybe you could answer this a little bit better, Joey. From an early Steelers preview, would you say run defense or pass defense is more of a strength with what Pittsburgh has done?
Well, I would say based on yesterday that you're going to have to protect Jacoby Brissett because
TJ Watt.
If there's anything of the Steelers, I mean, yeah, I know the Steelers are 2-4 currently before Monday Night Football as we sit, and a lot of people write off a lot of things about them, which is fair. But one thing they have done all year consistently is get after the quarterback and get after him a lot. So whether that's TJ Watt or Bud Dupree off the edge, whether that's Cam Hayward up the middle inside, or a blitzing Vince Williams or Devin Bush or Mike Hilton from the slot position, corner slot position, they come after you. So based on yesterday with how much, the Broncos are getting after Brissett, I would say that has to be the first and foremost thing for the Colts.
And I think we're starting to see a trend from opposing defenses like heavy blitzing against the Colts. Make Brissett beat you via the blitz. I think that's kind of where people are starting to trend towards. I saw a wild stat on the Steelers. Their 4 losses have come against teams that are combined 25-4.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 wins are against teams that are 3-13.
Yep.
Now, obviously, if they win tonight, that would be 3-20 with the Dolphins record. But we know offensively they're not the same juggernaut anywhere close to what they were when the Colts just got obliterated there, and for 3 or 4 straight years, home or away, didn't even matter. I'm really eager to see what Mason Rudolph looks like tonight.
Same.
How does he first game back, right?
Yep.
Yeah. How does he come back as well? And the early line is not big. Colts are favored by 1. is the early line, and certainly tonight will impact that. It's very early in the week for that, but yeah, Colts and Steelers next Sunday.
That would be the biggest thing. Just looking ahead to that is, if the Colts get out of there with a win, is just making sure that he's not having to do spin moves and try to get the hell out of there all day. So, yep. All right, man. Big Colts win to start the week. We'll come back on Thursday. I'll be heading to Pittsburgh this weekend. What's coming up the rest of the week? Yeah,
we'll have trade deadline coverage all day over the next kind of 36 hours. Hopefully, for our sake, nothing too significant happens. If something does happen, maybe an emergency pod if it's necessary. If not, we'll see you Thursday morning. Again, Colts right now, the number 2 seed in the AFC. The Cardiac Colts strike again with this victory. If you haven't already, check out 1075thefan.com and our YouTube page, 1075 The Fan over there. We've got some video content weekly on the site. And for those of you that listen to the podcast via YouTube, we appreciate that. And we'll come back at you either on Thursday or maybe a little sooner than that, depending how active Chris Ballard is. Everybody have a great week. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.